Today I wanted to talk about one of the most underutilized tools in Civil 3D, um, which, in my opinion, is property sets. Um, and so, what property sets are is they allow you to add additional data to objects within your drawing in Civil 3D. And this becomes useful because you can populate this data with scripts from Dynamo or whatever you like to use, um, and then it can be displayed in labels by default in Civil 3D. So it eliminates a lot of manual data entry, and it also allows the user to have some inputs for programs to make more advanced programs. And I'm gonna just show y'all how to make a simple property set. Um, so over in the Manage tab, if you go to Define Property Sets, then it'll open up the Style Manager, and it'll show you all the property sets that you have in the drawing and maybe recent ones that you've opened up. Um, but to create one, you right click and create a new one. So I'm just gonna name this Test, um, and then I'm gonna say it applies to a polyline, and you can see that it basically all objects, AutoCAD and Civil 3D, are on this list, so you can apply them to any object. Um, and then I'm going to also apply it to the general segment label, so that the label can pull the data from the polyline. And then within this property set, I can start defining the schema um, of what this definition is going to be. So I'm just going to do one simple one that's going to say label text. And by default, it's a text type. So that means it'll have this label next to it and then an entry for the user to type in their text. And this will be what the label will pull from, to show y'all how easy it is to set up a label that pulls from property set data. Um, and then just to show some other examples, I'm going to do a list. And so to set that up, you can go and press this filter up here, and it'll change the view of this window. And over here in list definitions, you can go and press new. I have one here that has a couple of items though, so make sure you select that it applies to manual property definitions. So then you can choose your source to be that list, and then additionally you can have some properties that are automatic from the polyline. So you could get the area of the polyline, or you can get whether it's closed or not. Both are useful properties. The And then you can get fancy and use a function if you wanted to then transform one of those automatic property values into something else. Like um, for civil engineering, obviously changing into acres is pretty important. Um, so I'll just add that in there. And then you can test it with the value right here in sample values. But this is a pretty simple property set, and I'm going to now apply this to an object in my drawing. So once I press OK, that property set is in the drawing now, and I can select this polyline and go into its properties. Now if you go into the extended data panel, this is where you can apply the property sets to the object. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom left, and I'm going to add the property set that I set up. And now we have the values that we set up. We have the area in acres. We have a value saying whether it's closed or not. We have the input for label text, and then we have the lists example where it's a drop down. Now, for the labels to pull that data, and I think, in my opinion, it's easier to set up a label like this than do text overrides. But basically, now that we have that property set applying the polyline, and the general segment label, we can have this property sets tab appear, and we can have that label text put in the label. I'm just going to delete the rest of this out of there. And now I'm just going to write in text. And so now this label is pulling directly from this property set. So if I change this, it's going to change the label automatically, which I think is a lot easier than going into edit label text and select text component and all that jazz. It's much simpler to set up a label this way, and it's really useful when you start populating your data with Dynamo for your calculations. So now that we've seen that how the property sets work and how the labels can pull from them, I'm going to show you an example of how two property sets can work together and be pulled in by Dynamo to create geometry to basically grade a pond. So in this example, I'll draw this out. So in this example, we'll have a pond that we'll have defined by an outer polyline. And then within the property set, we have a depth. We have a slope, a side slope, and then a bottom slope. And basically, it'll generate a pond based on these inputs. And the slope is determined by an outfall circle, which I'll show you in how it works. So if I go into manage and define property sets again, and I've already set up these property sets, so I can just drag them over into this drawing. I have the outfall object, which applies to circles. And then I have the pond, which applies to the polyline. I'm going to go ahead and remove this test property set from the polyline and then add the pond one to it. And then I'm going to name this pond. And I'm going to say the side slopes are 3 to 1. And I'm going to say the bottom slope is 1% for a depth of 6 feet. And then I'm going to similarly name my circle with the outfall property set. I'm going to name it the same name, pond. And now these two objects are going to work together. You'll see in the Dynamo script that there's a node here that is object by property. So basically, if you put in the document that it's in, you put in the property set name, and then you can control it by having a value, which for this program I have the pond. It has a solve true false button right down here, and for the outfall I just have a true false get all, which will get all of the bottoms of the ponds, and so by grabbing this geometry and using the property set that was applied to the outer boundary, it's going to now try to generate a pond based on those inputs. And if you see, it grades down at 1%. Well, first it has a berm that grades up 3-1, and then it has a width of 8 feet, and then now if we wanted to make the pond bottom maybe 2%, or we can do that quickly by changing the property set and pressing run. And now these bottom circles will be spaced 50 feet apart instead of the 100 feet apart. And I'll just show this in 2 different viewports. So you can see the definition of the pond. And then if I needed to adjust this in any way, like maybe I move that line over there and I hit run, then the pond will adjust to the the new line work. So this is just one example of using property sets as inputs for a script, and then having it output different values. So in this one, I have it output the volume. I have it output the volume, and I have it output the contour areas.